Sure. I've been in tons of them, but kind of the biggest band I was ever in was in the early days of In This Moment. I was in a band called Pathology, performed a lot with Fear Factory. I tour managed bands like Divine Heresy, Intronaut, All Hail the Yeti. And I've been on a lot of big fests, Ozfest, Warp Tour, and just did a lot of time on the road. Had some pretty, big ups and big downs.
Were you on Ozfest when it was kind of the metal festival? I guess it would be like what, early aughts?
Yeah, this was like, yeah, right at the kind of right when metalcore was really taking over. So it was still pretty high energy and there were good bands on it, but it definitely was sort of at that, sort of on the far side of the peak, maybe a year or two past like the real true peak of it.
And it was expensive to get on Ozfest, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah. I used to, I mean, for second stage, there were a lot of buy-ons. So it was like probably 75% of the bands that played second stage were buy-ons. There were also third stage, like parking lot stages and stuff. So those, I don't know what those, I think those were sponsored by like MySpace and stuff, but
Oh, wow.
yeah. In fact, I played the MySpace stage at Warp Tour. That was a little different. It wasn't like the parking lot stage, but it was the little stage. But and it
Within
was
this moment?
not Within This Moment. That was with another band called Nothing Less, which was sort of a hardcore punk band, I guess you'd say. But yeah, that one wasn't a buy-on, but Ozfest it was full of buy-ons for sure. It was. I don't know what everyone paid, but there were bands that I think paid upwards of $10,000 to be on that tour.
I heard some disgusting numbers of main stage band.
Oh yeah, see, I didn't even. I never was privy to that, but I can believe it. That's for sure.
So there's somebody named Mr. P that says buy-ons, like they paid to be on the show. Can you explain buy-ons? 'Cause I think that's one of those things too that a lot of people don't understand. Again, when it goes back to like you're on said festival, you're on said tour. A lot of people buy on, and this goes through any genre of music. They
Yeah.
buy on to be part of a tour.
Sorry, I'm trying to mess with my light here a little. I just like, I don't know why I'm red, man. I'm not that red. All right. So buy-ons are they were mostly a response to how kind of how music had started devaluing in the 2000s. This isn't to say that there weren't buy-ons before, but they became a really mainstream thing. So typically, like you'd have a tour with like maybe a bit of a bigger headliner, and then they'd have a main support. And then usually, like as you got down the roster, there were bands that actually had to pay to be on the tour. So a band could pay $5,000-$10,000 to basically open for an entire tour. Sometimes more, but it just really depends on the tour. And it depends on who's building the tour. So, you're paying into an amount that a promoter has or not a promoter, but an agent has essentially set up, or, certain tours that are, put out by larger corporations like I'm sure iHeart does it, and Live Nation used to do it, but they would basically you're basically paying for the privilege of opening up for bands, and for those of us who've been on the ground in the city markets where we were playing live shows at the venues, every week and stuff. It's real similar to kind of how promoters used to have you sell tickets. Like you had to sell 100 tickets to play the show. And of course, nobody could sell that many tickets unless nobody who was selling tickets to play the show could sell that many tickets, because if you could draw like that, you didn't have to sell tickets. And so it was just it's a way to exploit people for sure. I don't agree with it, but the problem is that there's always going to be someone who's willing to do it, and sometimes it can be worth it. I don't mean to like say that in defense of it. It's just that sometimes bands do get on a tour that hits right, and they are able to make their money back. But more often than not, a buy-on is just another massive expense that you're probably not going to recoup.
Another thing, I see people that kind of are familiar in the chat. I see people look like they're a little bit familiar with maybe we call it the pay-to-play model. It's really ultimately what it is.
Yeah.
And most venues in LA, New York, definitely, I know LA does this on the Sunset Strip.
Yeah.
You have to sell about 25 tickets, 25 to 50 tickets, depending on the size of the venue.
Yeah.
And how many bands they put on the bill. And there was a time when promoters would try to at least match the bands sonically, kind of.
Mm-hmm.
But when I was around and people would try to make you pay to play, a lot of times it was just literally five, totally a ska band, a punk band. And in LA, especially, you have a rotating cast of fans. So opens, there 25 people or however many people they could get to come out would come. And a lot of times the bands would front the money and just give the tickets away.
Yep, that's a really common thing. I mean, I've been in my early days in LA. That's something that I had done with a band. Not really that it wasn't that we wanted to do that, but we figured that we'd be more likely to get people to come if we just gave them tickets and ate the money. And that worked, but each one of us was out like $200 or something. I mean, it wasn't a nothing amount. Yeah. So yeah.
You want to play a show? This is years ago. Me and Cindy were trying to play not the Viper. What's right next to the Rainbow? Is the Roxy?
Roxy. Yep.
And it was like Christmas Eve. They're like, we got Christmas Eve. And it was going to be this great show. We thought it was going to be so great. They're like, okay, you just have to sell. It was like $750 worth of tickets. Like, that makes no sense.
Yeah.
We're from LA.
Yep.
Yeah. So, and the buy-on for a tour, the band that buys on, let's also keep in mind, usually they're not getting like a payout at the end of the night.
No. I mean, usually when you buy on, I mean, you're on a tour with bands who have guarantees. So, and they usually aren't doing door deals. So it's like they're getting their guarantee, whatever that amount is. Like a mid-range band probably can do $1,500 a night or something. And that guarantee is paid out by the promoter to the artist. And so they aren't, that money goes to them. It's possible with a buy-on to get written in, some kind of guarantee, maybe $100 a night, $150 a night. Really unlikely though. For the most part, when you buy on, especially if you're just like a no-name band, like you don't have any real following at all, you're pretty much just eating that money and hoping that you can make it up in merch, which, the odds of that working are pretty slim if you're not somewhat well known, and you're not good at getting people out in every city, which frankly nobody's great at that, if you don't have a huge audience already. But so that's kind of what happens.